Hey traders, it's John Fortune here of this week's Weekly Forex Forecast. We're going to run through over 30 markets, highlighting targets in each market for the week ahead. And as we go through the markets, we're going to build out a high probability watch list along the way for next week. And we're going to display the watch list in full at the end of the video. In last week's video, we had 17 markets on the high probability watch list, and out of those 17, only 3 of them failed to either take out their targets or close in the direction of their targets last week. So looking ahead to this week, in previous videos we've noted the fact that the US dollar index looks to be in a fourth wave correction to the upside, and last week we highlighted the 92.47 as the target to the upside we're looking for, and we did take out this target to the pip, and this was the high in the DXY last week. You can see that after we traded into the key area of resistance and the target set from last week, we started to come down a bit, and this sell-off is just simply as it stands viewed as a near-term correction in the DXY. I am looking further upside in the DXY next week, and we are focused on the 92.74. So now we've had this correction, I would be looking for further advances in the DXY next week. And all this simply means is that when we look at the pairs, I do favor dollar strength positions once again in the dollar pairs next week. And it means that I do go into next week with a bullish bias on the US dollar. I do also think there's going to be a number of opportunities next week outside of the dollar pairs, and we're going to cover all of that in today's video. Crude oil, this was a market that was on the high probability watch list last week, and we did take out the target set at the 66.46. Very simply put, going into this week, I do favor long positions in this market, and this is once again one to watch for next week. We started to pull back after taking out the target last week. Any deeper correction should be viewed once again as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market. And we're going to be looking up towards target 2 set from last week at the 68.71. Next is euro dollar. In last week's video, we wanted to see a correction in euro dollar because we'd sold off quite hard, and we want to see a correction to give us the opportunity to start to look for short positions in this market. We have had a nice correction in this market now, so very simply put, I am looking for further declines in this market this week. Any deep correction is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for short positions down towards the next key of support to the downside of the target set at the 1.1827. Something important to note for next week is we do have FOMC on Wednesday at 6 PM GMT. So don't be surprised if the dollar pairs pretty much do nothing between now and Wednesday, and we start to see moves taking place from Wednesday onwards in the dollar pairs. Next is pound dollar. Now pound dollar is quite a choppy market. It is still structured to the upside, so I favor long positions in this market. We also have the FOMC risk with all of the dollar pairs next week, get quite volatile come Wednesday. I do not see this as being one of the best opportunities next week, so it doesn't go on the watch list. However, if you are looking to trade pound dollar, any correction towards the 1.3820 would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals, perhaps on Wednesday. And I would be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set, at the 1.4281. US dollar yen, this was a market last week that was on the high probability watch list to the upside, and we did take out the target set to the pip at the 109.19. Going into this week, this goes down on the watch list once again, so any correction in this market is simply going to be viewed next week as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 109.85. Aussie dollar, this was not a market on the watch list last week, and you can see we didn't really go anywhere, and this is the whole point of the high probability watch list, is to get you involved in the markets that are going to move and keep you out of the markets which are most likely to be choppy or just moving sideways. In Aussie dollar, we pulled back to the 0.7787, which was a key area of resistance highlighted from previous weeks. If you are looking to trade this market, this would be the area I would be interested in looking for breakouts to the downside, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.7607. New Zealand dollar, last week we were looking for a correction in this market. This was not on the watch list last week, and it's not on the watch list this week. We started to correct. Any deep correction in this market will once again be viewed as an opportunity if you are looking to trade New Zealand dollar for a bearish reversal to the downside, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set, the 0.7097. US dollar Swiss franc, this was on the watch list last week for a high probability move to the upside alongside US dollar yen. We did take out the target to the pip at the 0.9369, that was the high of the week. Going into this week, you can see we started to decline from this target, and this is just viewed as a near-term correction, another opportunity to start to look for bullish breakouts in this market. We're going to be looking up towards the next key of resistance, the upside of the target set, at 0.9426. US dollar CAD, not down on the watch list last week as one to watch and not down on the watch list this week as one to watch. If you are looking to trade this though, I do favour short positions. I have a bearish bias on this market. Any correction in this market therefore would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bearish breakouts in US dollar CAD down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.2363. Next is gold. Now last week we highlighted the fact that we have a bearish bias on this market overall. We wanted to see a correction ideally in this market so we could start to look for reversals. There wasn't much space to the target last week. We've started to get this correction, so any deeper correction in gold is simply viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1670.93. So US dollar Swiss franc, US dollar yen, euro dollar and gold are my 4 preferred dollar pairs going into next week. Just keep in mind we have FOMC on Wednesday, so don't be surprised, as I said, if the dollar pairs especially don't do anything between now and Wednesday, and then the markets get very volatile on Wednesday evening. So bear that in mind, it is a risk going into next week. Euro yen, not down on the watch list this week as one of the best pairs. We came very close to the target last week. I am bullish on this market. If you are looking to trade euro yen, any correction in this market would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set at the 130.59. Franc yen, one of my least favourite pairs last week and one of my least favourite pairs this week. We were looking overall in this market, the 117.280 is a pullback area, and we did pull back and test this. If you are looking to trade this, and I probably won't be next week, almost certainly not, any reversal from this area would be viewed as the opportunity, however, to start to look for bearish setups down towards the 115.12. Pound yen, added to the watch list last week and highlighted as one to watch to the upside. We took out both targets and you can see how nicely these levels were respected last week. And pound yen really just showing that the time it takes to pick these levels each week really does pay off and makes our life easier during the week ahead. Going into this week, any correction in this market, once again, will be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 153.68. Aussie yen, last week we highlighted this as one to watch and we started the week here and we rallied, a really nice rally to the upside, almost taking out the target. We stopped just short, so although we didn't take out the targets here, we came very close. For anybody not involved from last week, any correction before taking out the targets will once again provide an opportunity to look for bullish reversals. And any long positions will be first of all up towards the 84.90, and if we can break through here, there is quite a big gap between the 84.90 and the 87.20. When this happens, you can very often see price rocketing between these levels, so that's just something to keep an eye on. But once we break above the 84.90, we're going to be looking up towards the second key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 87.20. CAD yen, highlighted as one to watch to the upside last week and added to last week's watch list. We did take out both targets with nice price action. We respected the first target, corrected before moving on to the second target. Going into this week, you can see how stretched this market is. This is in an uptrend. This is something we should really be focused on, looking for long positions to position into this market to the upside. So going into next week, we have a nice momentum. Any correction in this market, either we start to correct before we take out the target or we take out the first target and then start to correct. But either way, any correction in this market will be viewed next week as an opportunity to once again look for bullish setups up towards the next key of resistance, the upside, either the 87.68 first, or as I say, if it takes this out first, onto the second key of resistance, the upside, at the 88.47. New Zealand yen, this was a market that was added to the watch list last week for a high probability move to the upside. We did move to the upside, but we didn't really go too far. We had a move, we didn't take out the target or really come close to the target last week. So although we had a positive week in New Zealand yen, going into this week it comes off the watch list. I think there are better pairs out there this week, although I am still bullish on New Zealand yen. Any correction towards the 77.34 will once again be the opportunity to look for bullish setups in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 79.54. Next is Euro Frank. Now Euro Frank is an interesting one because this was a market we had on the watch list over a number of weeks to the upside, and when it was on the watch list we were taking out targets to the upside. And last week for the first time we took it off the high probability watch list, and you can see we pretty much went nowhere in this market last week. So as I said before, you can see how the watch list helps us not only to try and predict markets which are going to move, but helps us to predict which markets are not going to move, and therefore we can filter these markets out. Going into this week, I am still bullish overall on Euro Frank, although it is not on the high probability watch list again this week. Any correction towards the 1.0975 would be viewed as the opportunity to start to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.1185. Euro New Zealand pretty much went nowhere last week and it comes off the watch list. This is not down on the watch list this week. I am still bearish overall on this market, and this correction is viewed as the opportunity, if you are looking to trade this market, start to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key support to the downside and the target set at the 1.6408. Euro Aussie, this was highlighted as one to watch to the downside last week and added to the watch list, and we did have a nice move to the downside last week, but we didn't come and take out the target. There's still a bit of a way to go. So for anybody not involved in this from last week, any correction once again in this market is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bearish breakouts down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 1.5235. Euro pound, last week we started the week in this area and we were looking for a sell-off into the 0.85380. This was highlighted as one to watch to the downside. We did have a nice sell-off, but we stopped just shy of the target. So for anybody not involved from last week, we need to see a correction if you're going to look for another opportunity, and any pullback in this area would be viewed as the opportunity to look for bearish setups once again, down towards the next key of support to the downside and the target from last week at the 0.8538. Next is Eurocad. Now last week this was highlighted as one to watch to the downside and it was on the watch list. I did have a couple of people asking me in the comment section what was my favorite currency pair last week, and it was Eurocad if I had to pick one. And you can see we came down, we took out the first target, we respected it nicely before correcting and selling off, coming very, very close to the second target, which I expect to be taken out this week. For anybody not already involved in this pair from last week, any correction would be needed now as we're quite close to the target, but any correction would once again simply be viewed as another opportunity to look for bearish reversals in this market, down towards the next key of support to the downside and target 2 from last week at the 1.4870. Pound Frank, this was a market highlighted last week as one to watch to the upside. It was on the watch list and we did have a move to the upside, but we stopped just shy of the target. So for anybody not involved from last week, a correction would be preferable now, and any correction once again would be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance to the upside and the target set from last week, the 1.3015. Pound Aussie, I am bullish on this market, but it is not down on the watch list as one of my preferred markets for next week. We've started to correct towards the 1.78720 already, so any breakout to the upside would be viewed as the opportunity for anybody looking to trade this market, as the opportunity to start to look for long positions up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target set at the 1.8215. Pound CAD, I have been bearish on this market, and last week we did take out the target to the downside at the 1.7429. Going into this week, I'm still bearish on this market. I do think we see lower lows, although it's not on the watch list as one of the best opportunities that I see for next week. Any correction in this market, we have some nice momentum, so any correction would be viewed next week for anybody looking to trade this market as the opportunity to look for bearish setups down to the 1.7257. Pound New Zealand, I am bullish on this market, but it has not been on the high probability watch list for the last few weeks. Any correction in this market would be viewed for anybody looking to trade this as the opportunity to start to look for bullish breakouts up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and target set at the 1.9616. Aussie Frank, this was down on the watch list last week for a high probability move to the upside. We did have a move to the upside, but we didn't take out the target. So for anybody not involved from last week, any correction once again in this market is going to be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set from last week, 0.7271. Aussie CAD, last week I was bearish on this market and I'm bearish on this market once again this week. It is not on the high probability watch list. Last week we were looking for a correction and we did have a nice correction before selling off towards the target, although we haven't taken it out. So for anybody trading this market and not already positioned from last week, any correction once again would be viewed simply as another opportunity to look for bearish setups in this market down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set from last week at the 0.9636. Aussie New Zealand, this market has not been on the high probability watch list for the last couple of weeks, and it has been pretty choppy over those last couple of weeks, so we filtered those moves out. For anybody looking to trade this though, the market is structured to the upside going into next week. We do have some momentum somewhat out of this, arguably a bit of an ascending triangle pattern. So any correction in this market next week would be viewed as an opportunity to look for bullish reversals up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 1.0897. New Zealand CAD, last week I was bearish on this market and we did come down and take out both targets to the downside in this market. This just misses out on the high probability watch list this week. It's very, very close. Out of all of the markets that are not on the high probability watch list, New Zealand CAD is probably my favorite out of all of the ones which are not on the high probability watch list. It is very, very close to being on there. Very simply put, going into this week, I am looking for lower lows in this market. We have some momentum and any correction in this market would be viewed next week as the opportunity to start to look for bearish reversals down to the next key of support to the downside and the target set at the 0.8872. New Zealand Franc, I am bullish on this market, but it is not down on the high probability watch list. It's quite choppy. I would like to see, because we're coming up to the target, I would like to see any correction in this market first, and this would be viewed for anybody looking to trade this market as the opportunity to look for bullish breakouts up towards the 0.6734. And last but of course never least, we have CAD Franc. Last week this was down as a high probability move to the upside. It was on the watch list and we had a really nice move taking out both targets to the upside. Nice price action, taking out the first target, correcting and finishing the week right at the second target. This was my second favourite pair last week after Eurocad, and I do like this pair once again going into this week. Any correction in this market is simply going to be viewed as another opportunity to look for bullish reversals in this market up towards the next key of resistance, the upside and the target set at the 0.7503. So that is it from me for this week, guys. As always, we're not trying to trade every single market. We're trying to highlight the markets which are most likely to move and the direction they're most likely to move for the week ahead. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, please let me know by liking, sharing and subscribing. A big thank you to everybody who does that on a regular basis, and a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed to the channel so far and everybody who comments, likes, shares and subscribes to this content on a regular basis. I want to wish you all a nice weekend, and I want to wish you all a fantastic trading week next week. The only thing left to say is take care and don't forget to trade safely.